The Premier League is back and it has already got people debating. After Chelsea lost to Manchester City, a lot of people have been piling on the pressure, saying Chelsea were abject and really, really poor in the game. However, on the other hand, people are saying that Chelsea actually quite surprised them with how well they played. So what is the truth? Did Chelsea have a good game? Did they have a bad game? What did they do well and what did they not do so well? And this is the Chelsea side that Maresca decided to play. And let's not forget the fact that despite a lot that's been made about the amount of players that Chelsea brought in, the size of the current squad and how bloated it is, there is still a Chelsea side that held Manchester City to 2 draws last season, 4-4 at home at Stamford Bridge and 1-1 away at the Etihad. And when you think about it, most of these players were involved for the majority of last season as well. However, they have been bolstered with the addition of Wesley Fofana at centre-back, who obviously didn't play a single minute last season, Lavia, who only played 32 minutes in the league against Crystal Palace, and Christopher Nkunku, who was available for Chelsea last year but only played 11 matches in the league. So not only is this a Chelsea squad that are used to playing against Man City and have done well against them last season, but one that's also actually stronger because of the additions of players who weren't available last year. And before we get into what Chelsea did well and not so well, we actually need to talk about what were they trying to do in this game. And in the first 10 minutes, I definitely think both sides were trying to play out from the back, were slow in build-up. However, they were just kind of feeling themselves out, making sure that they didn't make any mistakes early on into the game and into the first game of the new season. But I think the first thing that we saw was a change from Manchester City, actually, which was Savinho going over to the right-hand side and Dogu coming over to the left. And although Cucurella had a pretty good game overall, in the first 10 minutes of the game, he definitely was very aggressive, he was very on it, and he was really had Dogu's number. But then once Savinho went on to that right-hand side, I think Cucurella really struggled against him 1v1 because Savinho beat him 3 times, 3 successful dribbles past Cucurella. And I think if Savinho's ball was maybe a little bit better, he probably, could have helped Manchester City create a few more big chances and maybe even get a goal even earlier on than they did. And Chelsea were definitely doing okay in their build-up. You can see that Maresca wants them to play out from the back and, really pass through the lines. However, you could really tell that the Chelsea fans were getting a bit impatient with it because everything was happening a little bit too slow. It wasn't quite quick enough for them. And I think that's something to take something for Chelsea fans to get used to because that's definitely how Maresca wants to play. And they did it right for the most part. However, they were really struggling to get the ball into Manchester City's final third. And I think a reason for that was because of how stretched their whole back four was. When they were in build-up, they were really trying to break through the lines and pass the ball to Caicedo and Lavia, and it just didn't quite work out early on. And that's because Manchester City were kind of playing this 3-1-6 formation, where Doku was keeping the width out on the left-hand side, Savinho was all the way out on the right-hand side, and then Haaland was occupying the two centre-backs. And then, of course, you had the Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne in these half spaces in between the full-back and centre-baacks, and just causing all sorts of trouble. And then Kovacic was kind of just there anchoring the midfield on his own for City. And Rico Lewis, who I think had a fantastic game and one who I think is going to be really an eye to keep an eye on this season, he was kind of out on the right-hand side, in the middle of the times as well, and he was really joining in the press as well, just leaving Kovacic completely on his own. So Fernandez had to go in and join against Rico Lewis as well, and then Cavario, Diaz and Akanji pushed up with Nkunku and Palmer being pushed really far back because you can see here there's a 2v1 on the wide area, so Palmer had to go in and help out and Nkunku had to go in and help out, and that kind of left Nicolas Jackson completely isolated all on his own, which actually led to Manchester City's first goal. And you can see in this still here, this is the build up to Manchester City's first goal, and Jurgen is cutting in from that left hand side, and Moses Caicedo has actually gone out to try and help out Malo Gusto because of how much space and time that Doku has out there, but actually leaves the back four incredibly stretched of Chelsea because you can actually see him, because behind me is Savinho, who Cucurella is keeping one eye out on, and he knows that he can't vacate that space and go and help Levi Koval out with Haaland because of the fact that if he does, then there is a free space and free man, and Savinho will have a pretty easy shot on target. And it is the clever work of Kevin De Bruyne in that half space on the left hand side, and Bernardo Silva actually joining the attacks front line, joining Haaland up top, which actually pulls the Chelsea defenders completely out of the way. And I think Bernardo Silva definitely does get a touch. The ball finds its way to Haaland, and Haaland just has too much strength and is able to get away from both Cole and Cucurella to put a lovely little dink finish over Sanchez in goal. And I think it was far too easy for Manchester City at that point because they were just pulling Chelsea defence completely apart. The spaces between them, if you look at the space between Fofana and Cole here, there is so much space between them. Bernardo Silva is completely unmarked. Yes, Fofana is keeping an eye on him, but if that ball went straight to Silva with his touch and control, he'd be able to easily find a shot on target quite easily there. So I think Chelsea definitely had a problem, and that's something that they really struggled with initially in the first 20 minutes, which obviously led to the Haaland goal. But from that point on, I think Chelsea did improve in the second half of the first half, because I think from there they were able to have the passing was a bit more crisp and they were able to get through Man City a lot better, and I'll show you how. And while Chelsea were doing okay, they did struggle against Manchester City's width. However, once that goal went in, they were able to play out from the back a little bit better. And here you can see that Lavia's getting the ball from the goalkeeper Sanchez, and he turns Kevin De Bruyne to get away from the press. And then Lavia is able to make the pass to Cole Palmer, and then all of a sudden you've got a 3 versus Manchester City's 4 defenders. You've got Malo Gusto, who's high and wide on the right hand side, squaring up with Gavardio. You've got Nicholas Jackson marking the 2 centre backs of Manchester City, and just off screen you've got Christopher Nkunku, who actually Rico Lewis is turning his shoulder to make sure to have a look where he is, and all of a sudden you're able to break on this Man City side and create something from it as well. And as the play develops, Chelsea end up having 2 players in the box of Jackson and Nkunku versus the 3 Man City defenders, with Enzo Fernandez also on the edge of the box, and this turned out to be a really good move and one that actually Chelsea should do a lot better. And I think this is a perfect example of the what ifs for Chelsea in this game, because yes, they had some poor moments and poor spells, but they actually also had some really bright spots and spells as well. And I think if it was someone else, maybe it was Enzo Fernandez, and maybe they could have worked something a bit better here. I think Chelsea could have really threatened Manchester City's goal a lot more than they did in this game. Which then brings me on to Enzo Maresca's choice of players for this game. And I can completely understand why he decided to go for Lavia and Caicedo as a double pivot in midfield. I think he clearly wanted that defensive security in front of the back line against Manchester City's box midfield to really shore up that defence. And I think it worked for the most part. However, in the attack, I do think that it nullified them a little bit, because the player who was in that position in the forward areas, controlling the entire pitch, was Enzo Fernandez. And a lot been made about him on and off the field, but I think sticking with on the field, I think him in that number 10 position is just the wrong position for him. I think that he's a very good player, and I think that at his best, he's a world-class, deep-lying playmaker and great passer of the ball. But I think in the number 10 position in the final third, I don't think that's the perfect position for him. And I think this game really showed it, and I'm going to show you examples of why. And I've gone back to the one that I showed you just a couple of minutes ago, because this was a promising Chelsea attack. And where does the ball end up? At Enzo Fernandez's feet. And I think if you're a natural number 10 in this position, you see the ball coming to you on the edge of the box and you're completely unmarked and you've got the defenders marking their men ahead of you, I think you take a shot here in this position, and I think this is what Enzo Fernandez fails to do. What he ends up doing is he's trying to take a touch, and I don't know why he's trying to take a touch. Maybe he's going to try and set himself up, or maybe try and find a pass, but from here you just shoot. He ends up taking a very heavy touch, the ball goes away from him, and he ends up going down under the pressure from Savinho, who, in my opinion, doesn't foul him. I think Enzo just sees the ball going so far away, he feels the contact, he goes down, and I think he's looking for it, and I think it's the right decision from the referee not to give a foul, free kick or a penalty here, because I think, yes, it was a bit too easy and it was a dive, but for me, Enzo has to be shooting here. And I've got another example of where I think maybe another player in that position does a bit better. For this one, the ball is being played to Enzo Fernandez, and he's going to receive the ball right on the edge of the box. And he has a bit of a stinker in terms of his touch. He needs to have a better, he needs to be a lot tighter, and then he may be able to get either a shot away or a pass in the final third. And allows for Ruben Dias to intercept him again, and for me, I think it's not a foul or a free kick. I think it's one where, there's not enough contact. And in my opinion, I think Enzo Fernandez is a really good player, but I think he's just been utilised in the wrong way. I think he's a player who needs to be making the passes, but I don't think he's the one that should be receiving them in the final third. I think some other players in that Chelsea squad, the likes of Palmer and Nkunku, Jackson, I think they'll all be better in these situations on the edge of the box, and I don't think that Enzo Fernandez, I don't think that's his strength, and I don't think that's one where he should be long term. And then it got me thinking about the players' average positions during the course of the game for Chelsea, and I thought to myself, well, I don't think Chelsea have had too many shots, and in total they didn't. They had 10 shots, 3 on target, 1 big chance over the course of the game, and it wasn't one where the game was end-to-end. There weren't too many shots of Manchester City either. But I think about who was in the positions to be taking those shots, and I thought to myself, well, yeah, you got Nicholas Jackson up front who, I don't think had a really great game, but, you could see from the heat map that he was in the box a little bit. You got also Christopher Nkunku out on the left-hand side, and, he's not really in any central areas. He's maybe coming more from the left. You got Cole Palmer, Chelsea's top scorer from last season. And I think this is quite a worrying one for me, because you can see most of his work is out wide on the right-hand side, and he really needs to be in that half space or maybe even central on the edge of the box, because, Chelsea's top goal scorer last season. He's arguably Chelsea's best player. He needs to be getting the majority of chances. So who was in the box the most for Chelsea over the course of the game? It was actually Enzo Fernandez. As you can see here, he has a bit of a red spot over here on the edge of the box. He was also on the box on the left-hand side where he had a shot which got deflected after a corner, I think, as well it was. So I really do think that if Chelsea are going to persist with Enzo Fernandez in the 10, that it is a mistake, in my opinion. And I don't think this is one where Enzo's going to be in the 10 long term. I think he's going to be dropped back into that midfield double pivot alongside maybe Caicedo or Lavia. I think Lavia had a really good game, actually. And if it were to be Lavia and Fernandez and not just Caicedo and Fernandez, I think that could work as well. But you want the player who's going to be your biggest threat in terms of the attacking front in the box the most, and he's getting the most of the chances. And if that's Enzo Fernandez, I think that is a mistake. It needs to be Cole Palmer, Christopher Nkunku, even Nicolas Jackson. And I think playing Fernandez in the 10, while I can understand because it was Maresca being a bit defensive and not trying to give City too much of initiative and not let the game get too open, I think it was a mistake. And I think actually in the second half, Chelsea were a lot better, especially when Kieran Hall came on. I think Pedro Neto came on. Didn't have a great game, but I thought that when Fernandez was a lot deeper, Chelsea were, doing the best work in that situation. I think maybe Nkunku in the 10, maybe Palmer in the 10, something needs to change going forward. And for me, that's the duality of this Enzo Fernandez and Chelsea team performance, because I think when Chelsea did best and when Enzo Fernandez did best was actually at the same time, which is when he was doing his work a lot deeper in the midfield. And this ball is from the first half. Enzo Fernandez gets the ball with his back to goal and he ends up putting a pass over the top to Malo Gusto, and I think this is really well worked. Chelsea don't end up making anything from it, but I think this was definitely an opportunity with, if they on another day, they definitely could have done better with this situation. You have this one here again in the first half. There's 4 Manchester City players about to close in on Fernandez, and what does he do? He ends up finding a pass to Cole Palmer on the other side. You got this one here where Man City give the ball away softly in the middle of the park and Fernandez ends up picking it up. He then plays the ball to Nicolas Jackson, who arguably should do better in this position, and ends up fouling Ruben Dias, who gets just in front of him. And I've had to move myself for this one, but you can see Enzo Fernandez is on the end of the ball, and when it's not taking a shot, that he actually can find a pass, and he's got a pretty good vision as well. Here you can see Pedro Neto, who's just off screen on the far post, and he tries to play the ball to him. And if it wasn't for the fantastic reading and interception by Rico Lewis, then Pedro Neto would have had a tap in. Here later on in the game, Chelsea are going for it, and he's picking up the ball between the defenders, and he's about to pick a long pass to Malo Gusto. And on the other side of the screen I go, just to let you know that Malo Gusto does get in the ball, and Chelsea then start another attack. And those were pretty easy for me to find. I didn't have to go looking far to find those highlights of Enzo Fernandez. I don't think it's as simple as saying he had a good game, and I don't think it's as easy as saying he had a bad game. I think it's one where he had bright moments and he had bad moments, but I definitely think that the number 10 position isn't for him. I think much deeper is where he needs to be, and I think just against Man City, yes, Maresca went with Caicedo and Lavia. Is he going to go with that in every game? I don't think so. I think it is going to be Fernandez and one more. Who that is, I'm not quite sure. I think Lavia did have a great game, as I mentioned. I think Caicedo, for the money Chelsea spent on him, he's probably got to start as well. So that's one where Maresca's got to try and find 2 out of those 3. And I do think that it could work for Chelsea. However, Manchester City's second goal, I do have some issues with, because it is far too easy for Kovacic to get away from both Caicedo and Enzo. I'm sure we've all seen the rounds that this photo has been doing, and I think, you know what, it's probably true. I mean, the money that Chelsea spent on Caicedo, the money that they spent on Enzo Fernandez, and it was the former Chelsea man who they sold for £25 million, who ended up beating both of them quite easily, I think, and that's the worry more than anything else. The fact that it was so easy for Kovacic to weave his way between them and then to get a shot off, and I think one that Robert Sanchez should definitely have done better with as well. But I think, all in all, it wasn't the worst day in the world for Chelsea. I mean, I think Man City would just be happy with the win, considering some of the players that they had missing. I mean, the likes of Rodri, the likes of Kyle Walker, John Stones. And I think, yes, if you were to be a real pessimist, you could look at that as a Chelsea fan and say, yeah, Man City didn't have the best team out there, and they still beat us 2-0 pretty comprehensively. However, I'm going to choose to stay on the positive side and say, I think there were some things that Chelsea can learn from this game that they can take and, really learn from in the future games, and they can take, with a bit of pride from that performance. And in terms of the rest of the Chelsea team, I think Sanchez had a average game goal. I think maybe that's a bit harsh. He probably had a decent game goal. He made 3 saves over the course of the game. All 3 you probably expect him to make. One was quite good. I thought he got a deflection off the defender. I think he definitely should have done much better for the goal that Kovacic scored. He definitely gets a good hand on it, and he should be palming that away to safety. And yeah, I think we all know what Sanchez is. We know that he's decent ball playing. He's a decent shot stopper. Is he the world-class keeper that Chelsea need? Probably not. I think Gusto was really good in this game. I think with Palmer tucking in, Gusto with his high energy getting up and down, and then doing all right against Jeremy Doku as well, who's one of the quickest players in the league. I thought that Fofana and Cole did a good job in defence, keeping Haaland pretty quiet for the most part. Yes, obviously the goal, and yes, I think he had a shot in the second half which took first time with his left foot. But I think that Fofana and Cole, ball playing wise, are really good, and I think that they're pretty quick as well. They're just quite young, quite inexperienced playing together, and I think they need to work together. I think there's one moment where I think Doku had the ball out on this left-hand side. Gusto was all the way up, and Fofana just, beat Doku for pace as Doku tried to go past him. And I think really the ball won, but Fofana was with him step by step, so that's really encouraging, especially after the injury issues that he's had. I mean, all the injury issues that he's had. I thought that Cucurella was good. I think he definitely did better against Doku than he did against Savinho. I think Savinho did give him a bit of troubles. 3 times he drove past him successfully. I think that was a bit of a worry, but I think you can see the way he's tucking into that midfield and Gusto is going high and wide that it is going to be a bit of an asymmetric formation. And I think Cucurella tucking inside is probably a player that he's able to do that and he can do that pretty well. Caicedo, yeah, decent, not much to talk about. I do think that him and Enzo, there definitely needs to be work to be defensively. They're going to play as a double pivot. But although the Lavia was really good and really encouraging to see him after a long injury as well, only 32 minutes I think last season as well. So the fact that he's giving something Maresca to think about. Maybe it's going to be him and Fernandez or him and Caicedo going forward. But yeah, Lavia really good about. Fernandez we've talked a lot about so far, so I'm going to skip over that. Palmer and Nkunku, I do have a little bit of a worry about the fact that Gusto was all the way up here, so Palmer was drifting in a little bit, but he wasn't really getting into the edge of the box and into the box as much as I would have liked. And I think Nkunku's same for that as well. He was keeping the width on the left hand side because Cucurella was inverting. And I do think to myself that Chelsea's main goal threats are probably Palmer and Nkunku, and Palmer out here and Nkunku out here. That's not really the best or ideal place for them, in my opinion. They need to be in the box. They need to be getting on the end of crosses, trying to be scoring goals, and also creating them themselves. And so, I think one where Maresca might have to rethink this. I think he might stick with keeping Nkunku out wide on the left and Palmer where he is maybe more in a creative role than a goal-scoring role. I do think that results will maybe force him to eventually change that and maybe put them a bit closer into goal. I actually think that maybe Nkunku's best position is as a false nine, but he doesn't quite have that running power to go in behind and really challenge defenders physically in the Premier League. So it could be one where I could see maybe, let's keep Lavia out for now. Let's just say it's Fernandez and Caicedo. Maybe Nkunku in his number 10 position, and I think maybe a player like Pedro Neto, who did do quite well when he came on. I thought there were times where he was out on his byline and he kind of struggled a little bit. But when he was coming inside here, I think the one where Fernandez made that pass to him and the ball went to the far post of Neto, and I think Ricardo just got it away. I think that showed that Neto it can be a goal scorer for the team as well. So yeah, I definitely think Neto, maybe even Mudryk for the sake of it, out on his left hand side could be really, really good. But if you don't want to, maybe you want to keep Nkunku out there, I think one is definitely Madueke to consider. Maybe moving Palmer into that 10 position just behind Nicholas Jackson, because the two examples I showed you of Enzo Fernandez on the edge of the box, getting the ball, Palmer in those situations would be absolutely frightening. We saw the one where Palmer took the ball over his shoulder and ended up lobbing Guardiola, and if it wasn't for the fact that I think there was an offside in the play, that Palmer definitely could have been through as well. So that's one where I really like the look of. Gustad's right, Madueke cutting inside and Palmer there along with Jackson. I think that could work really, really well. And I think maybe even like some Carlo Mudryk, you can maybe have Nkunku and Palmer in there if you're really going for a game. Caicedo zone. This is only probably if you're chasing a game at the end of a game. And I think maybe Caicedo there as well. But I do think what I do like is there are options. I mean, I didn't even talk about Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, Maresca's man from Chelsea. Maybe not Nkunku. Maybe Caicedo, Dewsbury-Hall and Palmer in there. That actually looks pretty good. But I do think Caicedo maybe needs someone alongside him. So maybe Caicedo and Dewsbury-Hall there together could work a bit better. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. There's still lots and lots of games to go. This is only the first one, and it was Manchester City. So Chelsea will have easy games. They will have opposition who are going to make it a bit easier for them. Maresca has plenty of time to figure out what he's going to work with. I think there are positives. I think there were negatives as well. But let me know, what do you guys think? Was it more of a positive game? Was it more of a negative game? Did you like Chelsea's performance? Did you not like it? Subscribe. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.